Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our training session. So my name is Nikki Kimball. I'm one of the educational consultants at Just2easy. And in today's session, we're going to be looking at using Just2easy to teach data. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. It is a 45-minute session, so I'm going to try my hardest to be done by 4:15. Questions can be asked via the chat function, so I do have the Teams open on my second screen. So if you have any questions as we go along, please just pop them in the chat, and at some point I will look over and hopefully be able to answer your question. Alternatively, I will be doing a Q&A session at the end, so you're more than welcome to hang around and put me on the spot. It doesn't even have to be anything to do with data. It can just be random questions about Just2easy. This session is being recorded and will be made available through YouTube later on tonight. Right, in terms of today's session content, I've kind of split it in terms of key stages. So we're going to be looking at early years key stage 1 to start with. And the two tools we have available are JIT pictogram and JIT chart. Then we'll move more into our key stage 2 provision. So we're going to be looking at creating branching databases using JIT branch. We'll also look at database, so creating your own database and using the example databases that we have available. And then I will show you some library resources that we have available to use, pre-created in the library. So let's get started, shall we? So JIT is our Just2easy infant toolkit, and it has a range of different tools within it. It's actually a toolkit with 8 different tools, and it does have 3 data tools. So those being pictogram, chart, and branch. So pictogram is a great place to start with your younger students that are just beginning to understand about data and data handling. So pictogram includes simple pre-made templates ready for users to use and also to edit. It allows the integration of pictures and clip art, so you can add in your own pictures and search for images using Google search. It allows people to create their own as well, and it can be shared with users, so created by you and shared with a class, for example. So there are 2 different templates here. So I've got one pre-created template, so using an already existing template we have ready to use, and also creating your own. So let's have a look at how we're going to do these. So once you log in via whichever method it is that you log in, I think predominantly it is Northern Irish and Scottish teachers with us. So you would log in using the C2K or the Glow credentials. And you'll land on your launch pad. So this is J2 Launch. This is kind of the home page. Now data is here. Okay, so J2 data, and you've got your 3 different JIT tools and also database. Now the other way to get there is to go through JIT. So if we open up JIT, as I said, JIT is a toolkit with 8 different tools. And we've got chart, pictogram, which is red, and branch, which is purple. Now just to highlight as well, a handy classroom management tool. Each tool will have their own colour page surround. So chart is orange, pictogram is red. So from a classroom management perspective, that's really handy because you can look across a classroom and see which students are off doing an animation instead of their pictogram, because there's always one, isn't there? And the JIT tools always open up in a very similar fashion. They will prompt the user to either choose a template or a background, depending on which tool you're using. So for pictogram, it will prompt you to choose a template. So there are some pre-populated ones. So we've got pets, fruit, mini beasts, travel or journey, and weather. There's also the blank one where you can create your own. So we're going to look at using a template first, how we can edit that, and then I will show you how to create your own as well. So we're going to open up Journey, and when we choose a template, it is by default sort of a closed template. So you'll notice there's no editing tools along the left-hand side. We've got our 4 different boxes or pictograms. So we can just use this as it is. So we can get the students to maybe log how each child gets to school, and they can use these plus and minus buttons at the bottom, and that will add them into the pictogram. Alternatively, you do have the edit button down here. So when I tick that, that now brings up all my editing tools here. and my plus and minus button. So these will add or take away the buttons along the bottom. So I might want to add in some roller skating, for example. So I can do that by either by drawing. If I'm feeling particularly ambitious, I can draw some roller skates, which I'm not going to do. It's much easier on a touchscreen device than it would be on a laptop with a mouse. But we do have our clip art at the top. So it's opened up into animals. Obviously, I'm not going to add animals in my journeys tool. There are some transport clip art images, so I can click on that and open that. So, you know, there's boats and there's a pirate ship, if that's how you get to school. Plane, motorbike. Obviously, none of these are suitable, at least you'd hope not. So what we can do instead is we can either add an image from my pictures. So anything that you've added into your My Files using the upload button will showcase in here. So you can see there I've got a van, so there might be some children travelling by van. Or this will probably be one of your best friends when using JIT, this little button here, this little globe button here. So that is our web search. So it essentially passes through it's a Google image search that passes through a safe search. So I'm going to look for skates. And then wait for it to have a think. Clearly it's got that Monday feeling. There we go. And we've got a variety of different images that we can choose. And you can use this down menu, so ice skates, if that's how they got to school. But we might use, let's go for this one here. So I'm going to click on this image, and that's going to add that as a sort of a clickable image. So then all I need to do is add that into that box. So you can see as I sort of hover over these boxes, they turn, they change colour. So they turn to a red box. So that's showing me which box I'm adding this image into. So I want to add it into that blank one there. So I can click on that. I don't need to click directly into the box. I can hover over the top. So that's really useful if the students are using smaller devices, certainly, because it can be quite difficult for them to sort of pick a box. The smaller the device, the more tricky that will be. So they only need to hover over the top and click, and you can see there that has added that roller skate into that box. And then I can click where it says label, and I can add my label, so skates. So there we go. So I've created a template and I've edited my template. Now I can turn those editing functions off if I wanted to, or I can leave them on depending on what activities I'm doing with the students. And then I can save my pictogram. So I'm going to say journey to school, September 24, for example. It would help if I could spell. There we go. And then I can hit the save button up here. Now what's nice about JIT is it will give them some feedback, so it gives them that little saving circle, so they know something's happening. I definitely know that's an issue when you're working with the younger students. They can keep clicking save because nothing looks like it's happening. But you'll also notice that the save button greys out, so we've got a little ghost save button there, so they can only save one version of this unless they were to make any changes. So if we were to populate this pictogram, for example, there we go. I could then save that as a version as well. And there we go. So that's going to save that as two separate versions. The other thing that we can do is we can record audio in all of our JIT tools. Now, this is particularly handy with data handling because obviously the collating the data is one side, the data handling is one side of the curriculum, but also the analysis is an important part. So this will allow you to capture evidence of that. So for example, I can click on this little record function and it brings up this movable record box. And you could get the children to analyse that data. In fact, I'm just going to make that smaller. There we go. Let's try that again. So I'm going to hit the record button. In our class, most people walked to school. And there we go. We've got some linked audio now that we can play back. And there we go. And obviously you can make that as long or as short as you want to. And then we can click save. And that is saved into our My Files area. So if a student did that, that would save into their My Files that you can access as a teacher through Pupil Files. If you did that on a teacher device, that would save into your My Files area. So there we go. Now, the other thing that we can do, I'm just going to empty this. and I'm going to delete this out. I might want to save this as a template for my students to have a go at themselves. So I've saved that. So I can share that with my students by going to my files area. There's that journey to school template. So I can click on that and I can click share, and I can use this little drop down menu here, and I can share that either with my class. I've got various users, so I've got the users tab, or all classes. So if you're teaching across a cohort, for example, you could share with class 2 as well as your own class. And there we go, and that will have a list of classes. So my students will be able to access that through the shared files area. So that is how you would create a template and for the students to have a go. Okay. Now JIT, if I wanted to create my own, so I'm just going to use this asterisk here, so that will bring that up again. So I could create my own using the blank template, and we would do that in exactly the same way that we just added that extra button. So for example, I'm going to open up my clip art. I'm going to use my Google search, and I'm going to look for devices in the home. So I'm going to have an iPad, for example, or a tablet. I'm going to add that into that box. I might have a PC. There we go, let's use that one. I might have an iPhone, make sure it comes up with smartphone. There we go. And I might have a laptop, for example. And there we go, let's use that one and add that in. And then I can remove one of those boxes. And obviously I can change these labels: laptop, smartphone, PC, and a tablet, for example. And there we go, we've got a very quick and easy devices in the home activity for our students to go and do as a homework activity, for example. So I can save that, and that is then saved into my files area. So there we go. So that is, well, let's get rid of that. That's pictogram, how to use a template and how to create your own activity for the students to have a go with. Now let's have a quick look at chart. So JIT chart works in a very similar fashion. So it's a nice step up from pictogram. If your students are familiar with using pictogram, it shouldn't be too much of a jump. So it allows you to use a template or create your own, same as pictogram. You can edit a template. You can view data in a table, pie chart, bar chart, line chart, or block chart. You can save, and you can also export that as an image. So from JIT, chart is the lovely orange tab here, and again it opens the same way as pictogram did, prompts you to choose a template. So let's create our own. So I'm going to go blank. Obviously you can change, you can choose one of the templates and then create your own. And let's add in our favorite fruit. So I'm going to add apple, banana, pear, and strawberry. There we go. I don't know why that's not blue. There we go. And then I can just add my numbers in. So I'm going to say 5 people liked apples, 7 people like banana, 2 people like pear, and 8 people liked strawberry. So there we go. It's created already our block chart. We can change things like the colour. So I'm going to have a green apple, a yellow banana. Let's go for a brown pear and a red strawberry. There we go. So I made it more colour appropriate. You can also change the column title. So we'll have favourite fruits, and that will label that. And we've got the number. Okay. So you can change that to number of children, for example. And that has changed that label on that axis. We've got the different chart types. So when I tick them, they will appear on the page. And there we go. So they can tally those up, not tally them up, that's the wrong phrase. They can look at those side by side and have sort of analyze which chart shows their data in the best format. So I don't like line chart, and let's get rid of block chart. And there we go, I've got 2. We can also turn the table off if we didn't want the table. Okay, or you can have them all together. Then the same as we do with pictogram, we can rename our file. we've got the audio recording function. So again, they can record that analysis side, and then they can hit the save button. You've got that spinning circle and it grays out. So they can only save one copy of that unless they make any changes. Now, the other thing that we have in both JIT chart and JIT pictogram is this button over here, which sometimes gets overlooked. So that is save as image. So that's a great way of then using this particular image in other tools such as J2Create or JIT Mix if you wanted to. So you can save that as an image, and that will save just that flat image. So if I just show you in my files, so this is the pictogram. So if I click that, the pictogram, the chart, so that will open up ready to edit again. And then this is the flat image. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't print off the table, which we are looking at. So I have nagged the development team to add that in. So hopefully that will change soon. But that is then an image that you could either print off or you could look at and use in other tools. Now, the other thing that we can do for all of these, if I could click on the green eye there, and this goes for any piece of work, you do have the option to QR code to it. So this may save you some printer ink if you do have a requirement for printing. Colour printing obviously quite expensive. So if you wanted to, you can print that off. So we do have the save to my files and the print option there. And someone can scan that and see that particular piece of work. So for example, maybe this is part of your maths curriculum. You can print that and put that in your maths book. So that is a function that is very useful to a lot of schools. So that is JIT chart. Right, let's have a look at JIT branch now. So branch is all around branching databases. Now, certainly in the English curriculum, that's maths year 3, end of year 3, beginning of year 4. So I think it'll be in a similar sort of P4, P5 area of the curriculum. I keep meaning to check that. So all around branching databases, so using data and using sorting questions to sort the data. So you can add a background, you can add data, you can classify, sort the data using questions, and there is a simple and an advanced mode, which I will talk you through. So this is just an example of a simple mini beast sorting activity. So you can see here we've got various different mini beasts and then some very simple questions. Does it have 8 legs? Does it live near water? Does it live in a hive? Then on this side, it's a much more complex game. It's a guess who game. So do they wear glasses? Then they have to sort whether they wear glasses. Are they a woman? Do they have curly hair? Do they have facial hair? Do they have grey hair? Okay. So that is an example of a more complex game. So branch again is within JIT. So we can go up here to branch, and that is a lovely sort of purple coloured page. Now, personally, I like to keep my page fairly blank. But it really depends on what the topic is. You know, if you're sorting, I don't know, beach creatures, you could have a beach background. If it's mini beast, you could have a park background. But personally, I like a blank background. And then we need to add data into our tree. So this is called our data tree. So I'll start in the simple mode and then I'll show you the difference between that and the advanced mode. So we can use our clip art here. And I am going to sort some animals. So I'm going to click in the animals. I'm going to add I'm just going to add 4 pieces of data. I'm going to add a monkey. And then I might be thinking of something that's not in here. So I might think of a dolphin, for example. So if something isn't in these clip art libraries, you do have the option to add images from your My Files. So if you've already got an image, you can add that in. You can take photographs directly into it, so that might be quite a nice way of building that in. You could do a guess who game of all the students in your class. They could take a photo of each student and then use questions to sort them. And then you've got this globe button. So again, that is our Google image search with the safe search filter added to it. So I'm going to look for a dolphin. And that's bringing up some nice images. So I'm going to add in this image here, and that has added that. Now, if I don't like it and I want to get rid of it, I can hover over that data and just press that bin, and that's going to remove it. So let's have a look. I might add this one instead. There we go. So those are our 4 pieces of data. Now, the difference between the simple mode and the advanced mode, at the moment, as I said, it's in simple. If I click on advanced, it then adds a title box and a description box. So this is a nice way of then building in your skills progression. So it could be in your year 3, year 4, they do it in the simple mode, just sorting the data according to pictures. And then when they revisit it in, say, year 5, year 6, P6, P7, you might want them to build it into maybe a science activity where they're sorting animals more scientifically. And they could add research facts into the description box, for example, that then determine the question. So things like lifespan or habitat or what they eat, that kind of thing. So, you know, am I a herbivore? Am I an omnivore? Could be one of the questions. So that's the main difference. But for today's purposes, I'm going to stick to my simple mode. So once you've got your pieces of data, and I think you can have a maximum of 32, I want to say, so it can be an incredibly large tree. I'm going to stick with 4. You then click this sort button down here, and that is going to require a sorting question. So I'm going to say, do I live in a tree? Okay, and you're going to drag the data that it applies to on the left. So if it's a yes, so these are yes, no questions. If it's a yes, it goes on the left. If it's a no, it goes on the right. So we just drag and drop. Now, if you've dragged it onto the wrong side, not a problem. Just hover over that piece of data and click that refresh button, and then you can re-drag it. You can also record audio. So you can record saying that question, just to add an extra element. And there is also text to speech here at the top. So, and there is text to speech that's built into JIT branch as well. So if I click OK, it's then going to ask me to classify or sort these two. So I'm going to say, can I fly? And obviously the one that it applies to goes on the left. The one that it doesn't apply to goes on the right. Now you have this button here because we're sort of one branch down. That will show you the question history. So this is the question that preceded this particular question. So do I live in a tree? So that really helps children to reflect on whether they've had this question already and they don't want to replicate any questions. So that just gives them a view of how these particular pieces of data have travelled through the tree so far. And then we click OK, and I'm going to say, do I live in water? Now, obviously, these questions are very simple. You could build in extension activities for these students depending on their levels. You know, as I said earlier, you could do things like, am I an omnivore? Am I a herbivore? Am I a mammal? Do I have a skeleton? That kind of thing. So you can really make this a very simple activity, but really make it quite a lot more in-depth and scientific. And then I click OK. And there is my branching database. Now the students will have access to the text-to-speech once it's created. So they can listen to those statements. They can also edit any of these. So these little white buttons in the left-hand corner here, that is your edit. So you can edit both the question and the data itself. So you could change that particular piece of data. Maybe you wanted a different picture, maybe you wanted a different item altogether, so you can change that. And then you can click play. So they would think of one of these. So maybe, for example, you want to get them to change up they might want to swap their activities, swap their devices to have a go. And it might be that this particular child is thinking of a whale, for example. So we're going to answer this with a whale in mind. So do I live in a tree? No. Do I live in water? Yes. Is this answer correct? So we're going to say no. And it's going to offer you the option to add in another item. So we're going to add in another branch to our tree. So we're going to click yes. So I'm now going to look for a whale. Here we go. I'm trying not to find a beached whale. Let's go for this lovely orca here. Now I need to think of a question, don't I, to Claire? I didn't think about this properly. Dolphins don't eat seals, do they? So do I eat seals? I might need to fact check myself, but for the purpose of today, we're going to go yes and no. Okay, okay. And there we go. We've got another branch to our tree now. And they can keep going with that if they wanted to. And then the same as with all the other JIT tools, we can save that. So we'll say animals branch, for example. And I can click save, and that is going to save that into our My Files area. Now within the JIT tools, you've also got the Publish to Journal button as well. So if any of you are using Journal, the students can save that and then they can publish straight to Journal just by clicking that button, and that will prompt them to publish if they wanted to. Now, if you don't know anything about J2 Journal, we do have a session already recorded on our YouTube channel available for you to follow along. It's a fantastic tool for showcasing best pieces of work. So I will leave that there. Right, so that we've covered JIT, chart, pictogram and branch. So we're going to move on to database. Another fantastic tool that you have lots of options with database. You can create singular databases, so the students can create a database of their own. You can create collaborative databases, so that's one database that someone makes and then shares so that everybody can input data into the database. And there's also some example databases freely available to use. And in fact, I'm currently looking at broadening the number of example databases we have. So hopefully we'll be adding to that shortly. So let's have a look at creating our own to start with, and then we'll look at the example database that we have, one of which is the Titanic database. And there are some resources in the library that are useful for that. So I'm going to open up database, and that is found through J2 data, and then we go to database, and that's where you'll find the examples. But let's have a look at database to start with. So this is how it opens. We've got a nice field, so a singular field with various columns. We've got field name, field type, default. So that is for things like a list, you'd have some default answers, and then units if you need them. So we're just going to start off with a very simple field. So we're going to say pupil name, for example. So imagine we're doing a pupil database. So the types, we've got various types that you can choose from. So text is going to be the obvious one for this one because they're going to have to type their name. But you can do things like a list. So you want to give them a list of things. Currency, date, picture, sound or video, and Boolean search. So those are some commonly used ones. But there we go. I'm going to leave that as text, and then I'm going to add another field. So this button here is going to add another field. And I'm going to have age, for example. Now age, that would be different. That would be a type would be number. And what I can also do instead of pressing that button is I can hit enter. That's going to add another field into my database. So now I might have height, for example. Let's change that to a capital. And that again is going to be a number. So I'm going to choose number out of my type list. And this time I'm going to add in some units because I want to know in centimetres. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in favourite subject. There we go. Now for this one, you could leave it as text. Now the only problem with that is you may end up with numerous answers to a question. So for example, a child might say PE is my favourite subject. Another child might say physical education is my favourite subject, or sports is my favourite subject. All three of those mean the same thing, but they would look like different pieces of data. So you want to give them a list that they can choose from. So as you can see, the default list is yes or no. So you might want to have, I don't know, do you like computing? Yes or no. So I'm going to have maths, ICT, PE, and English, for example. And there we go. And there is my database. So now I can save that database. So I'm going to have pupil info. Oh, I've already done it in September, but we'll go again. September, I'm going to save over the top of that. So just ignore that. Oh, September 2. There we go. So that has saved that field, that database. So now I've got these tabs along the top here. So my form tab, this is my database and how it looks. So I can input data. So for example, maybe the students have written this down and they're typing it up. So they can add into it all on one account. They could come up to your device, for example, and add a record and go and sit down. Obviously, that's not the most efficient way of doing that, but that is an option. Okay, so I can put into this, so I could say Nikki, age, I'm not going to disclose I'm going to pretend I'm 9, height, 110 centimetres, and my favourite subject, obviously, is ICT, and I can hit save. So that has added that as one record into my database. Now, if I want my students to have a go at this and to have it as a collaborative activity, I need to share it with them. So we've got the share box up here. Okay, so I can click share, and then I've got my drop down menu here, the same as we did a little bit earlier. So I can share that with my class. Now, depending on which managed service you're joining us from, certainly with C2K, you won't have your class there, you'll have staff instead, just because of the way that the SIM system is set up. So you can access your classes through the all classes area. So I might want to share that with my class 2 as well, or I can share with teaching classes or individual users. So that's how you would share with your class. Now, the other thing that we need to do is we need to lock into contributor mode. So if I tick that, that means that the students can then input into that particular database. So to show you how the students would access that, this is Lottie, she's in my class. She would access that through shared files. She would then go to list files and she would click on this box here. And she can input a record by clicking on this button, and she could say Lottie, age 8, height 110, and her favourite subject is PE, for example, and she can hit save, and that has saved that into the records now. So she can go through the records. So there's 1, there's 2. Obviously, they can add multiple records. Not much we can do about that, but that is how you would then make the database collaborative. So once they've done that and you've started inputting data, you can then introduce the tables. This is a great way of the children having a look at the data side by side, and they can have a look at, they can sort the columns according to alphabetical order or amount, and that will give them an idea of, you know, which ones are their favourite subject and that kind of thing. So that is how you can create your own collaborative database. Now, the example databases, as I showed you through J2 Data, there is that button there, but also when you're in J2 database, there is an examples button up here at the top. So I can click that, and that's going to bring up all of the databases, example databases we have. There are some examples of mini beasts, so that is our branching database, pictogram, chart, and vote. And these are the examples that we have for database. So countries, I think that data is correct to 2019, so it's a little bit out of date, but still gives a really nice sort of idea. And that gives things like population, area, language, flags. So that's got nice ties into sort of world around us topic. Online shop, so this links into the Teach Computing scheme of work if any of you are from English schools or using the Teach Computing scheme of work. So that is a whole activity in itself, I think in the year 5 block of work. Mini beasts, so that's great for lower down the school, so that you might even use that in year 2 or year 3. Pupils, you've got a template one there, and Titanic, and then you've got other ones as well. But let's have a look at the Titanic database just because it's such a fantastic resource. because I know certainly in Northern Ireland, this is a very common topic to be doing in sort of the upper end of the school. Now, this is historically correct data, so it's taken directly from the data set that was taken from the Titanic, and it lists a record of every person on the Titanic and quite in-depth information, so things like class, boarded, whether they survived or not, title, age. And how I generally teach, or used to teach this for my students, was that I would do it in a series of questions and leave them to try and figure out for themselves. So, for example, I would say to my students, right, I want to know how many Charlottes were on board. Okay. And I can guarantee what probably 99% of them are going to do is they're going to use these arrows here and they're going to click through until they find Charlotte. And there's one. And that obviously is not the most efficient way of doing that. So once, and depending how long you want to leave them doing that, you could buy yourself a good 5 minutes of time if you wanted to. You've got this keyword search up here. So our keyword, if you want to find Charlotte, is going to be Charlotte. So we would search for Charlotte, and we can see there we've got 5 entries. So that means there are 5 people on board. I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. So that she's not actually a Charlotte. So it's 4. And she's got Charlotte as a middle name. So there's actually 3 Charlottes on board. So this isn't the most efficient way of looking at these sort of data either. So we've got the form, but we can go to the table as well. So we can see that side by side. So that actually highlights, we can see that a little bit better, that there's actually 3 Charlottes on board. So that's quite useful. So I would do that a few times. You know, you want to know how many Harrys are on board. You want to know how many men are on board. You want to know how many people survived. And they can do that with the keyword search. Then you might want to build that up a little bit more. So you might want to know how many children were on board. So that's going to be a little bit trickier because there's nothing that says child or children. So you can't keyword search. So that's where you would introduce your advanced search. So on the left-hand side here, I'm just going to zoom in just so you can see. You've got this little magnifying glass. So that is going to expand our search functionality. And now we can use our field types. And we can introduce mathematical symbols and values. So for children, we're going to filter according to age. And we're going to use equals to or less than. And we're going to have the value is going to be 18. And we're going to hit enter. And that now shows us there's 230 children on board. Okay, so that's a nice way of doing that. And again, I would do that a few times, give them a few questions. I want to know how many, I don't know, people boarded at Southampton, how many people over the age of 65 were on board, and that kind of thing. And then once they're used to doing that, then you can introduce the and or functionality. So we've got the option to then add additional statements. So for example, I might want to know how many boys were on board. So we know that boys are under 18, but we also know that they have to be male. So we're going to add another statement. So we're going to have and gender is equal to male. So that shows us there's 125 boys on board. And then you might want to know how many of those boys survived. So you can have another and. So then we have the survivor or victim equals to, use that drop down menu, survived. So only 36 of those boys survived. So that's how we can start really fine tuning this data. So that should give the children a real understanding of how we use data, how important it is, what sorts of things we can sort of glean from that data. And then we've also got the chart functionality. So this is a great way of tallying up various bits of information in a more visual format than the table. So for example, we might want to know how many of each class are on board. So along the x-axis, we're then going to click class. So that gives us a nice visual format of how many people were on board for each class. So we've got first, second, third. So we can see there the third class is probably as much as the first and second combined. You've got your different chart types along here. So we've got 5 different chart types. And the pie chart will kind of pull apart. And it is interactive, so we can see the numbers when we hover over it. You've also got things like we can make it 3D, so it does look quite nice and professional, and you can stack things. So that's if you're in bar charts, you can stack them. Then we've also down here, we've got things like can change the chart color. And you can save the charts as an image. So this one here, that will save that into your My Files as a flat image that you can then use in other things like J2 Create. So maybe you're doing a presentation on the Titanic as part of your Titanic topic. So you could use this as a lesson. They could export this data. So I've clicked that little camera save button. If I go to my Files, there is that image, and I can import that as an image into J2 Create, so they could have, you know, this data shows blah 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 as part of their Titanic presentation. So that is that button there. And then once they're familiar with sort of tracking something along the x-axis, they can also group things. So in the group button, I might want to know how many of each class survived or didn't. So I'm going to go survivor or victim. And actually in a bar chart it's a bit more impactful. And you can see here we've got all of our different classes. So first survived, first didn't, second survived, second didn't, third survived, third didn't. So we can see there's a real disparity in that particular piece of data, that actually there's a lot more people in the third class that didn't survive. And you can then have a spin-off conversation about why that was. What was the reasoning for that? It's because they were in the lower decks and there wasn't as much space for them to get out, and blah blah blah. So that is our database. So hopefully that has been useful. As I said, I'm not sure on in the library, there is a Titanic database question sheet. So the library is full of resources, and there are a number of database resources, including, this is a nice one. This is an autumn tally chart, if you haven't seen it. So the library's got 2,500 resources in there, teacher-made content, and you can share that with your students. So they can only access it if it is shared with them. So you do need to click share and then share with your class, for example, and they would access that through the library. But just to give you an idea, this is one of our resources. So this has got the tallies, so we can drag these over. So they would find the items in this particular image, and then they can drag these over and create a tally chart. Obviously not very quickly. There we go. And there's our tally chart. So that's a nice activity. If I go to community, and if I search for data, it brings up quite a few items. There's that database search. So they would use that alongside the database, the example database. There is a number 1 and a number 2. So this one is just the keyword search, and this one then broadens into the advanced search. And there's lots more. So there's pictogram activity, dinosaur database, planets in our solar system. So that's the one that I'm working on at the moment. I want to try and import a data set for the planets as an example. So hopefully that is coming soon. Christmas databases, there's lots and lots of different things. So just look for data in the library, and that will bring up lots and lots of activities ready for you to set. There's a Marvel database one as well, if you've got any students that are superhero crazy. Right, I've got 1 minute. So these are our contact details. So edteam@j2e.com if you want to get in touch with us. That comes through to Charlie, Mary and myself. We're on X and Facebook, so Just2easy or Just2easy_com. We've just started a Facebook group for sharing lesson plans, resources, action plans, showcasing. So you can look for that. That's Just2easy Teachers. So that's really quite an interactive group. We only launched it last week, but please feel free to have a look for us and join if you feel that you'll find it useful. And then Just2easy TV. So this is our YouTube channel. Right here, this has been recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel later on tonight, once I've had a chance to create it, edit it. But there's our webinars. We've also got live lesson recordings. Now there's a number of database or data live lessons already recorded. So we've got the Titanic lesson in there, and in fact there's a re-recording of that because that's quite blurry. But there is one on I think, pictogram or chart. And then if you click here, the live tab here, these are all the ones that we've got coming up. So I'm doing 2 a month now for my sins. And I'm sure I'm trying to find one that has data. Maybe I haven't scheduled any data ones, but there are lots to choose from. So please join us for one of those. But yes, so that is the end of the training. Hopefully you've found that useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them into the chat. If not, thank you ever so much for joining us, and we hope to see you for another session very soon. So thank you.